Today we're going to look at lesson 21, relating decimals and fractions. This is the first lesson of week 3. Woohoo! All right, so it says, you know how to write equivalent fractions with denominators of 10 and 100. In this lesson, you will learn another way to write these fractions. Take a look at this problem. Max has 248 pennies. How many whole dollars does Max have? What fraction of a dollar is left over? So let's take a look at these charts here. Without counting all of those little tiny dots, you should recognize this picture. I have these in the classroom. They're hundreds flats, right? So there are 100 of those little boxes. So here's 100, here's 200, and I'll give you a guess without even counting how many are here? 48, okay? So 248. Now it says, how many pennies are there in $1? You should know there's 100 pennies in a dollar. How many whole dollars can you make with 248 pennies? How many cents are left over? Well, this is kind of like when we're thinking about that division. How close can we get without going over? If we need 100 pennies to make a dollar, okay, we can do 100 pennies from the first one, 100 pennies for the second one, so that's going to bring us up to 200, and then 48. So how many whole dollars can we make with 248 pennies? 2 whole dollars and 48 left over. Okay. So we know that 1 cent is equal to what fraction of a dollar? Well, think about it. 1 cent, okay? 1 cent out of how many cents make a dollar? Hopefully you said 100. So 1 cent is 1 out of 100 cents that we need to make a dollar. So if 1 cent is 1/100th of a dollar, what fraction of a dollar is 48 cents? Well, we have 48 out of how many total are needed? Hopefully you said 48 over 100 total are needed. Remember, this is how many you have, this is how many you need. Okay, this is the part, this is the whole. All right. How do you write this amount of whole dollars and a fraction of a dollar as a mixed number? Well, how many whole dollars do you have? You have 2 whole dollars. Okay. And what fraction do we need with it? We have 2 whole dollars and 48 1/100ths. How do you write $2.48 using the dollar sign? Well, that should be really easy for you because you know you've done that in 2nd grade. $2.48. So this representation and this representation are the same thing, only this is written as a fraction, this is written as a decimal. Fraction, decimal. Okay? All right, let's go to the next page. All right, it says, tenths and hundreds can also be written as decimals. Here is another way to think about 48 hundredths. Well, if we look at this, we know that 4 tenths is the same as 0.4. Now let's back this up a little bit. Without the full instruction, if we had been in the classroom, we would have done a whole unit where we would have gotten this back out. What did I make? Hopefully you said, oh, it's a place value chart. Yay! No, not really. But it is a place value chart. All right, so remember how we do this. We have ones. Now I'm going to leave these over here on purpose. Usually we're here. Okay, ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and millions. Okay, we've done the place value chart where we have made numbers bigger. Now we're going to talk about numbers that are less than 1. So we're going to add a piece to our place value chart. Okay, I'm going to add a decimal. A decimal. Okay, and that is going to help us to understand the place value of numbers that are less than 1. Now, we've talked a little bit about this with our fractions, but we haven't actually put it on the place value chart yet. When we're talking about the place that is directly after the decimal, this place is called tenths. Okay. When we're talking about this place, it's called hundredths. Okay, so what's the difference between this place and this place? Hopefully you said we have the THs there. That's how we tell the difference between the tens place. This is the tens. This is the hundreds. So this is the tens. This is the tenths. We got to have that th on there. This is the hundred. This is the hundredths. Okay? So these tenths and hundredths, just like how our place value chart can keep going this way, our place value chart can also keep going this way. You could go tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, millionths. It can keep going, okay? And the farther you go this way, the lower your number or the smaller your number. The more you go this way, the bigger your number, okay? So for example, if I had the number, I'm going to put a 2 in the ones place. What did we just say, 48? Let's look at the number we just created. Okay, so we said it was called $2.48. How do I say that? Do I say 2.48? No, we say and for the decimal. Okay, so the decimal in math words is and. So 2 and 48 hundredths. Okay, so when we're looking at the place value chart, it's just like how we did place value in the fall. Only now we're moving into those smaller pieces. So 2 and 48 hundredths. If I were to do that as a fraction, 2 and 48 hundredths. Do you hear how we say those the same? 2 and 48 hundredths, 2 and 48 hundredths. Same thing, just represented differently. Okay, so it does say this on our explanation here. It says, you can use a place value chart to understand the value of each digit. Decimals follow the same place value pattern as whole numbers. A digit in any place has 10 times the value it would have in its place to the right, and a tenth of the value it would have in the place to its left. So we talked in the fall about multiplying by 10. It's been a really long time. Do you remember how to do that? Do you remember that we talked about ones, tens, hundreds, thousands? Let's say I had 624 and I wanted to multiply it by 10. Well, now we know that we can do the zero rule, but we had to learn why first. Do you remember that when we multiply by 10, we slide to the right? And if there's an empty space, we have to add a 0. So 624 multiplied by 10, where we slide them all to the right, or to the left, we slide them to the left, is going to give us 6,240. Do you remember doing that? Okay, we talked about when you move from 600, so this value, this 600, when we move from 600 to 6,000, we've multiplied by 10. Okay, so anytime you move to the left on that place value chart, you're moving up a value. You're multiplying by 10. Likewise, we also did the other way. When you go the other way is when you divide by 10. So if I had 520 and I divide by 10, that means I'm going to slide my things over. What am I going to get? I'm going to get 52. Okay, so my value here was 500. My 5 value here was 500. My value here of my 5 is 50. I've decreased my value or divided by 10. That's what they're talking about, 1/10. So 50 is 1/10 of the value of 500. Okay, really all you have to remember is move to the left, you multiply, move to the right, you divide. All right, so it says, explain how thinking about money can help you understand decimals. Well, that's a pretty easy reflection. I'm going to let you do that on your own. But really, money is decimals. So word that how you'd like. If you need to pause to fill that in, go ahead and pause the video. Okay. I'm going to go on to the next page. So it says, a soccer camp has spots for 100 students. So far, 60 of those spots are filled. Write a fraction and a decimal in hundredths and tenths to show the amount of spots that are filled. Okay? So first they're going to have us picture it. You can use the model to understand how to write hundredths and tenths as a fraction. So let's look at this one. It is shaded for you. It's kind of hard to see though, so we'll reshade it. All right, so how many slots are filled? It says 60. So I could sit here and I could go 1, 2, 3. No way. Take way too long. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Okay, so we're going to go a little ahead. Let's look at that picture. What's shaded? How many pieces? 60. How many whole out of 100? Okay. Now let's look at it in terms of tenths. So now I'm going to look at this picture, and instead of looking at the individual boxes and saying, oh, there's 60 individual boxes, I'm going to look at this in terms of tenths. This square is broken into hundredths. This square is broken into tenths. I know that because I can go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. There's still 100 square, there's space for 100 squares there, but this is broken up into tenths. Now, if I shade the same amount, or if you can already see it's already shaded, let's look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So if 60 100 pieces are shaded, how many 10 pieces are shaded? Yeah, 6 out of 10. So let's look at the amount that's shaded. Is it the same? Absolutely it is. Look at the amount shaded here compared to the amount shaded here. It's the exact same shaded amount. The only thing that has changed is the size of the pieces. Okay? So now it says model it. You can use a place value chart. Now, wait a minute. Each square. You know what? I'm going to take this a step further, actually. Let's take this a little step further. Let's make a place value chart. Let's make one of our new place value charts. Let's fill it in. So remember, we're going to leave 2 spaces here, decimal here. This is the ones, tens, hundreds. That's old material. We know that. This is new. We're going to call this tenths. I do TTHS, tenths and hundreds. Okay. Now, if I fill this fraction into my place value chart, my last digit of my my piece that I need needs to go in the correct size. Okay, let me say that again. The last digit of the number of pieces I need needs to go in the correct size. So this 0 in this 60 needs to go in the hundredths place. So if I'm filling in, I'm going to bring my decimal point down. If I'm filling in my place value chart, this 0 needs to go in the hundredths place. There's my decimal. 60 hundredths is the same as 60 hundredths. It's the same thing. Same thing, just different way to write it. Likewise, let's do the same thing for this one. Let's make a chart. Count 2 over, put in your decimal point. Oh, I guess I missed one. Okay. Fill in what you know, the old stuff, ones, tens, hundreds. Now fill in the new. We know that this place is now called the tenths. This is called the hundredths. All right, bring down your decimal point. This 6 needs to go in the tenths place. That's it. That's all it is. So 6 tenths is the same as 60 hundredths. Well, isn't that exactly what these fractions said? 60 hundredths, 6 tenths. 6 tenths is the same as 60 hundredths, and 60 hundredths is the same as 6 tenths. Okay, just different ways to write it. All right, let's go ahead and flip the page. So it says connect it. Now you will use the models that you know about Now you will use the models and what you know about fractions and decimals to solve the problem. So we're going to look at picture it. That's on the previous page. The model on the left shows 60 squares shaded. Write a fraction for the model. Now think about it. We already did this. We already did all of this. So now we're going to put it into play. What fraction are we going to show for the 60 squares shaded? Hopefully you said 60 100ths. Divide the numerator and denominator by 10 and write the tenths fraction. Maybe you made this connection. 60 100ths, if you divide both by 10, it's going to give you 6 tenths. All we did was change the piece size. Look at the place value chart. Write a decimal in tenths and the equivalent decimal in hundredths. How are the two decimals different? Well, we did this too. Here is 60 hundredths, and that is the same as or equal to 6 tenths. How are they different? Well, right now you don't have to give me a big mathematical explanation. Really, all I want you to notice is 60 has the 0 and 6 tenths does not. This doesn't have an extra place. This doesn't go into the hundredths place. It only stays in the tenths place. Remember, how you say your place or where the place is dependent on where those numbers are on your place value chart. This one goes to the hundredths place, so this is 60 hundredths. This one only goes to the tenths place, so this is 6 tenths. Okay, so how are the two decimals different? One has a 0. So the 60 hundredths has a 0 in the hundredths place. The 6 tenths doesn't. Okay. If the denominator of a fraction is 10, the equivalent decimal has blank place after the decimal point. So let's look at that chart again. ones, tens, hundredths. Okay, you don't always have to go to, that's just my habit. I do ones, tens, hundredths. Ooh, that was a bad error. Ones, tens, hundreds. If we're talking about hundredths, we're on the other side. Okay, so here's your tenths. Here's your hundredths. All right. If the denominator of a fraction is a 10, the equivalent decimal has how many places past the decimal point? Well, if your decimal point is here, and we're talking about tenths, how many places past the decimal point? 1. If the denominator of the fraction is 100, the equivalent decimal has how many places after the decimal point? 1, 2. Okay. All right, so now it says, write a decimal equivalent to 83 hundredths. I want you to pause the video here and I want you to try this by yourself. Once you do number 6 and number 7, go ahead and unpause and see if you got these right. So 83 hundredths is going to be 83 hundredths. Here's my decimal point, kind of like my chart, tenths, hundredths. 2 tenths is going to be, there's my decimal point and the tenths place. Draw a model that shows the fraction and the decimal. So, I guess the model would just be oh, my lines are not perfect. However, you get the gist. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 3. So there's 83 hundredths. And my model for 2 tenths. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. And we're going to shade 2 of them. So the only difference when we're talking about tenths, we're talking about our tens rods. Remember those rods? We had the rods and we had the flats. The rods, you only need 10 to make 100. The flat is 100. All right. Let's try to solve a problem here. So it says, Eli collects sports cars. He said 5. Now let's read this number. The number we read after the decimal is 5. And what place is it in? Hundredths. So we say this as 5 hundredths. He says 5 hundredths of his cards are baseball cards. What fractions of his cards are baseball cards? All right. So if we know 5 hundredths, well, that's 5. That looks a little more familiar to you. 5 hundredths, 5 out of 100. This is shaded very lightly, so we can help. There's 5 out of 100. Okay? So now it says we can model it. You can also use a place value chart to help you write the decimal as an equal fraction or equivalent fraction. So we've got our decimal point here, tenths, 5 in the hundredths place. Okay. Now let's pretend you made your place value chart and you put your 5 in the hundredths place. What if you don't put a 0 in that tenths place? What's going to happen? You're going to change your number. If you forget to put a 0 in that tenths place, you've now changed your answer to 5 tenths. But we don't want 5 tenths. We want 5 hundredths. So don't forget to make sure that you fill your extra places before the decimal, or I should say after the decimal point and before your number. You've got to fill with zeros if there's not a space there. Okay. All right. Let's connect it. How can the model help you write a fraction equivalent to 5/100ths? Well, honestly, when you have decimals, if you say your decimals correctly, it gives you the answer. 5/100ths. 5/100ths. Tells you the answer. So the model shows us how many pieces are used out of 100. Sorry, I don't have the best of handwriting because I'm writing at a weird angle. Then it says, how can the place value chart help you write a fraction equivalent to 5/10ths? I'm sorry, 5/100ths. Well, how does the place value chart help you? You can put the 5 in the hundredths place. Then fill in the 0 in the tens place. Okay. Use words to describe the fraction of Eli's cards that are baseball cards. Well, however you want to put it. You can put it as a fraction. 5 out of 100 of Eli's cards are baseball cards. Okay, that's what they're trying to get you to see. 5/100ths or 5/100ths. So 5 out of 100 of Eli's cards are baseball cards. So what fraction? 5 out of 100. Explain how you write a decimal in hundredths as a fraction. Well, we've talked about it. I'm not going to fill this one in for you. I want you to do it. Explain how you can write a decimal in hundredths as a fraction. Well, I will tell you. Think about your chart. How can I make it go from a decimal to a fraction? Okay. All right, we're going to try it. We're going to write 9/10ths as a fraction. Why don't you go ahead and pause here? Try these two on your own. 9/10ths as a fraction. And here we have 89/100ths as a fraction. Okay? So decimals and fractions, especially when we're talking about tenths and hundredths, it's the same thing, just a different way to say it.